Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 198. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. Dave, the Steelers finishing up their last week of voluntary OTAs, although there will apparently be a rookie school for the young guys, according to Mike McCarthy, that'll be held next week before the team breaks for this summer. So got a roster move, got a couple things on the docket. Dave, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm trying to recover from my Jeopardy performance, Steelers Depot Jeopardy performance the other day.
You were doing fine for a while. You missed that $1,000, and that's what crushed you.
Oh, it's like a NASCAR race, right? I was running fine until I blew an engine, right? So there were a couple of questions within there that I don't want to play spoiler here, but there a couple of were where I knew the answer, but I didn't get chimed in quick enough. And here I was giving tips to everybody else on hot buttons and how to raise their hand appropriately. But I'm not going to be bitter like that, even though I feel like you designed the questions to tip to make it tougher on me, but
I'll never tell.
Anyway, if people haven't gotten a chance to that's on your YouTube channel, right? For them to see and also post it on the site.
Yes, that's correct. And I'll be on later this week. My first time as a contestant. Scott Brown is going to host, and so I'll get to prove my mettle if I'm just good with the questions or with the answers as well.
All right, I'm taking it that you didn't come up with the questions for your own appearance, right?
I'm going to plead the fifth on that one. No, I didn't. I have no involvement here. It's all Scott.
All right. Hopefully, Scott will have some good ones for you guys here. Let's see. Where are we? It is Wednesday. It's June the 10th. The Pittsburgh Steelers, no OTA practices today. No, I don't think anything media related with that. So kind of a slow day. And then obviously they'll round out their off-season practices with Thursday and Friday sessions. I don't know how much of the media will play a role in that, but we'll definitely see. It should give us something at least to talk about on Monday as we officially get into the off time of the off season, the lull between off season program and the start of training camp. But we've got a new punter on the roster, do we not?
We do. The Steelers have finally added a second punter in a roster move yesterday. The team released veteran wide receiver Brandon Johnson, who had spent a couple of stints with the team, and they claimed off of waivers former Tampa Bay Buccaneers punter Aidan Laros, a rookie undrafted free agent out of Kentucky. He was waived by Tampa Bay a couple days ago as they added a former Steelers specialist and kicker BT Potter, and so Laros got to heave-ho from Tampa Bay, and now will compete with Cameron Johnston in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, there's a couple of things within this. First and foremost, I don't know if you saw the what do they call it? The veteran special. The tryouts.
It's a showcase, I think.
Showcase for this past offseason there, and there's some video that we located that we put in the post on his claiming off waivers there, and I found that it's too bad you don't get more of that kind of stuff there, where you actually get to hear whoever the coach is or whoever the evaluator is yelling out the hang time and whether or not good kick or things like that. So I thought that was quite interesting. Seems like he's got a pretty decent leg, at least when he was punting on air. And punting on air is a lot different than obviously punting in games. I messed up and I did some research ahead of this here. It seems like who was it? Dane Brugler had him as the where is it here? Number 9. Where was he here?
Do you think Dane watches the punters? I'm curious because he never does reports, full-fledged reports on those guys. I wonder his process for
I
the
don't know how
specialists.
far he goes. I mean, he's got 40 listed in here. Kudos to him if he went through and watched a little bit of tape other than stat book scouting on some of these guys. But for whatever it is worth, he had him as his 10th rated punter in this year's draft class. Now, in Wosu, who was the 300 and something pound Penn State kicker that the Steelers had in for tryouts, was listed, I think, 7th on his list. So take that for what it's worth there. We're burying the lead here. This is a kid in Laros that was signed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as an undrafted free agent out of Kentucky after this year's draft. And who is the special teams coordinator at Tampa Bay?
It is one Danny Smith.
Yeah, so he didn't last. I don't know what there is to read into all this, but I found it quite amusing that you got a little bit of a connection here. Makes you kind of wonder if, and I don't think he was given much of a signing bonus at all for to sign with Tampa Bay there, but makes you kind of wonder if these two, both teams scouted him pretty heavy, and maybe he would have already been a Steeler had they been able to sign him as an undrafted free agent. But he didn't last very long in Tampa Bay. Obviously didn't make it to training camp aspect there, and now he's in Pittsburgh here, and obviously has an uphill battle. Tell the folks what we do know about him. He's a South African, I think, punter, and he has a toughness rating of 0, I think, according to EA Sports or whatnot. They've had a little bit of fun.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I hadn't noticed that.
Yeah, they have had a little bit of fun with that ever since college days and all like that. I think there was an interview with him, and they're making fun of he ex-rugby player, grew up playing rugby, so does have some physicality to him. I think 6'2", around 218 pounds. I think he was early on a Ray Guy Watch Award guy early last year. Obviously didn't win the award there. Went on to be undrafted, landed with Tampa Bay, didn't make it throughout the entire summer with him. But we've been wondering if this team would add a second punter to the offseason roster at some point to provide a little bit of competition for Cameron Johnston. This summer. They have indeed done that now. Anything else we should know about Laros?
Well, you covered it well when you asked me to give you the background on him. I think you gave a pretty good bio on him. And just to go back on the Dane Brugler, I'm not questioning Dane Brugler's credentials. He does a fantastic job. I just know that Lance Zierlein has said he kind of contracts out his special teams reports to NFL coaches, and they basically will help him write some of the bio and reports on his specialists. I wonder if Brugler does the same. But with Laros, yeah, it's funny he had that 0 toughness because, like you said, he was a rugby player growing up, and so a pretty tough guy by my book. He played I think linebacker too, maybe in high school, I want to say. So kind of a Sepulveda type of vibe to go back on a throwback punter name. But right-footed punter, got a big leg. He bounced around a couple different schools. Started off at Charlotte, which is nearby. He was, after moving from South Africa, was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So began at Charlotte and then went to UT Martin and then Kentucky, I think maybe the last 2 years with the Wildcats. And you talked about the big leg that he has. He was a kickoff specialist, I think, basically throughout his entire college career, at the very least at Charlotte. And so that usually means somebody that has a big leg. Often kickers are doing that, but punters with a big enough leg that can kind of save the kicker will get the look, and Laros did. So we'll see what he looks like. We'll see. It feels like Cameron Johnston has very good chance to make it, given that Pittsburgh has not made an incredible effort to get a second punter on the roster. They've certainly had a lot of options and explored a lot of different guys, with people in mandatory minicamp for a tryout, the 3 punters they had in rookie minicamp for a tryout, now adding Laros. But it feels like Johnston's going to be the guy, but he'll have to prove it. And so Laros, a big-legged punter. His father, I believe, played rugby for a long time. His grandfather was a pitcher in the Canadian leagues and also won a baseball title in Saratoga Springs, New York, as a coach, for anyone wanting some real nerdy fun facts about Laros. So we'll see what he looks like in the summer, but no surprise. We talked about this team was going to add a second punter before training camp because you want to save the leg and get through preseason games and go through practice, and virtually every team carries at least 2 specialists.
All right, he was claimed off waivers, so his 3-year undrafted contract, 3-year contract transfers over to the Steelers. Tampa Bay has to eat the signing bonus they gave him, which I believe was $5,000. So not a lot of dead money for them there. But we'll obviously now see how this competition goes and how long he could potentially stick on the roster throughout the summer, and if he can indeed wind up challenging Cameron Johnston at all. So and out the door goes Brandon Johnson. It makes you kind of wonder, and he was a veteran. It's officially termed a contract. What do they call it?
Termination?
Termination on him. He's not subject to waivers, and makes you kind of wonder if he might end up landing in Vegas with the Raiders, with the Steelers' old wide receiver coach over there.
Oh yeah, Zach Ghazzani is the Raiders receivers coach. I was wondering why you guys were talking last night about him going to the Raiders. Yeah, Ghazzani coached him in Denver and then Pittsburgh, and maybe he ends up with the Raiders. So a little surprised. I thought Johnson, they wanted maybe some veteran depth with some of those young guys at the back end of the roster, but I guess he, for whatever reason, he maybe didn't show during spring workouts, gets the axe.
One minor thing maybe we can dangerously read into this as well too is the Steelers depth chart. The guys under contract at wide receiver probably are relatively all healthy at this point.
Yeah, I would assume so and hope so. Didn't hear too much about injuries, and obviously it's tough to get that reported on during OTAs, but probably healthy if they're releasing a receiver.
All right.
I was going to ask you just really quickly, starting tomorrow, I'm going to do my annual Deconstructing the Steelers Roster series where I give roster odds of guys making the 53-man roster. This is not considered injury because that's impossible to predict, and so it's just going to be based off of talent and depth chart and odds a team adds somebody from the outside. What percentage chance would you give Cameron Johnston to be this team's punter week 1?
From where we sit right now, what little I do know about Laros, I would say 98.6%.
Oh, wow. So extremely high, very, very high. Now, that also could bring in an outside option if Johnson struggles and Laros, they don't want to trust him. So in theory, there is a door number 3. I'll spoil the one here, 85% on Johnston, just because he's still got to prove it. He has had the knee injuries, both in his first year in Pittsburgh and then last year as well. I think with the Giants, he got hurt and missed some time, or Buffalo, one of the two. And so there's something there to prove with him. But the overwhelming favorite in him being Holder, with the connection with Boswell and Kuntz, that whole operation is also a benefit for Johnson's chances.
All right, now look, I haven't researched to see how many teams actually have 2 punters on their offseason roster at this point, but at however many that becomes obviously scouting possibilities for the Steelers throughout through the preseason to see if maybe there's an even better, maybe they get in a situation where a team has 2 pretty good punters that don't really want to cut either one of them, and maybe they get one that way. But from where we sit right now, and I think it's in other words, it's a high probability, I think, and I'm not going out on a limb there, that Cameron Johnston is the odds-on favorite right now.
Agreed. And as you said, Pittsburgh will scout what the rest of the NFL looks like to weigh their options. That'll be done by the pro scouting department, now led by Max Gruder after his offseason promotion. All right, Dave, Pittsburgh holding OTAs. It was mostly for the young kids, although some veterans attended, which is always nice to see. And also should mention Alex Highsmith attended at least the Monday session. That was not made known by media because they were not allowed to attend practice on Monday, but it was posted to the Steelers site on their team gallery that he was there for the June 8th practice. And so I know there was some scuttlebutt on that last day of mandatory minicamp where Highsmith was not at practice. One day after Herbig gets his extension, team says he's sick. Is that cover? Is that legit or not? The fact that Highsmith showed up for the voluntary session on Monday tells me that there's no big rift between him and the team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Look, yeah, I know there's going to be constant speculation and has been. I know several, Jason Lockenbora, I think a few other. A lot of people are trying to connect the dots on the heels of the Herbig extension, to try to feed off of that. Potentially, maybe the Steelers trading away a guy like Highsmith, and I don't want to go all rehash all that, but from where we sit right now, and looking at where the Steelers are cap wise, and just noting that you don't want to probably trade out depth. Especially at that position, and based on, I think our own who was it, Ross McCorkle did a breakdown of actual snaps played by the three of those top three outside linebackers last year, and we talked recently about the games missed by at least one of those three guys last season. Barring Alex Highsmith just saying, "Look, I'm not very happy at this point," I would be quite. I don't want to go out and say it's 100% not going to happen. I've gotten burned over the years by making those kind of guarantees, but I would be quite surprised at this point if Alex Highsmith wound up being traded. And as we talk kind of throughout this last few shows here, the only way I would be slightly interested in it is if it was like a second round pick involved within this, and even that feels a little bit rich to get from another team at this point. I guess it's not totally implausible, but yeah, I don't see anything happening there, and I fully expect Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig to be on this team come week one of the regular season. Now, if you get into obviously close to the trade deadline, and depending on how the team is doing, I think all bets are off at that time. But as far as week one goes, I'll be quite surprised because Alex Highsmith just doesn't, to me, appear like a guy that's going to cause any problems on the heels of the Herbig extension. And we'll obviously see come the start of training camp. Some people are wondering if Alex Highsmith might have a soft hold in to try to get some money pushed ahead, all kind of what Cam Hayward has had happen to him. We'll see if that happens. I'd be surprised if that happens at this point as well too. But all this is to say that from where I sit right now, and I get some of the outside speculation and all, and even some of the Steelers beat writers and all at this point, I'll be surprised if Alex Highsmith is moved by week one.
Agreed. I think we're on the same page, and until new information says otherwise, that'll be how I think we both proceed with how the Steelers will handle their top three pass rushers. So, with a lot of the veterans away, including Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph, it was the Will Howard and Drew Allar show yesterday, and Aller. I was going to say Aller. I'm still getting used to Aller and Aller, and retraining my brain. Drew Allar yesterday, and so those guys were getting the reps, and Aller speaking after practice and talking about how valuable this week is for him because he wasn't getting as many reps before when all the quarterbacks were in Pittsburgh previously, and so really taking advantage of the chance to get some good reps and exclamation point on his work before the spring ends.
Yeah, it's hard to read a lot into what he had to say. It was a little bit longer media session with him. I thought he was real poised and handled himself real good and didn't come off as, I don't want to be here. And I thought he answered the questions thoroughly, and it was interesting I'm really enthralled with even though Mike McCarthy says quarterback school is kind of an outdated term now at this point because of the amount of time that they get to work with these guys. But it really does, at least seen from the outside, that there is structure to what Mike McCarthy's trying to do with these guys, and with all the cameras and filming them right from the start and getting a starting point, and then showing their progress in some of these drills moving forward. And it feels to hear Aller talk about where he feels some of his improvements have been, and the mental reps that he's taken when throughout this process when he's not in there, and how essentially this is a little bit bigger week for him with Aaron Rodgers not around. How much he's learned from. There's a good clip floating around by 93.7 The Fan, I think, from last week about Aaron Rodgers kind of I don't want to say pulling them to the side, but having a kind of a one-on-one conversation with Allar, and probably going over some things that either Allar saw or Roger saw or something along those lines. And Allar at least seems very receptive, much like Will Howard last year, of getting tutelage. And why wouldn't you when you've got a veteran quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, and really Mason Rudolph to a similar degree, being how he's been in the league for a while. So I like the feel of the overall structure of what I think Mike McCarthy's trying to accomplish with these guys, and I think it is good at this point that a lot of the veterans aren't around, particularly guys like. And I'm assuming Mason's not there either. I think it's just the two of them in Howard and Allar at this point, and these are. You get to find out how much these guys have absorbed as far as it comes to the playbook, and they get a few more reps with not having those veteran quarterbacks there. They get on the same page with some of these, maybe some receivers that they haven't had a chance to work with a little bit more. Although, I'm assuming maybe DK Metcalf isn't there, but just a good way to kind of wind this thing up. Specifically because once you get into training camp, it'll probably be a little bit harder for a few of these guys to get some higher amounts of reps here. So that was my big takeaway, and I thought for what it was, I thought Allar handled himself well during, I don't know, what was it, 8 or 9 minute media session.
Here's the most interesting thing that Allar said that caught my attention about where he's grown since joining the Steelers. He said, quote, "I feel a lot more comfortable physically. I feel like you can see that in my tape from 7-on-7 reps and even team reps that I've gotten. I look like I'm playing slower, which is a good thing. I'm thinking fast, but my feet are playing slow. I'm on time and in rhythm. I know when I'm not in rhythm just based off my feet. So I feel like I've really grown in that area," end quote. And so Mike McCarthy, a ground up type of coach who really wants to work footwork. Heard McCarthy talk a lot about that, about Aller specifically, and then also just broadly about coaching the quarterback position. And so we're kind of feeling that now with this rookie quarterback. And I like to hear that. I like to hear that he's playing. His feet are playing slow. The question will be, can he kind of maintain that poise and rhythm once things are live? Once you're inside a stadium and you feel like you need to speed up because the game starts playing a whole lot faster, defenses start hitting back. That'll be the test. But Drew Allar certainly in a good spot right now.
Yeah, look, I mean, all this is great during the off season. This part of the off season is where you get a lot of optimism comes in about this team as a whole when it comes to the 91 man roster and all. But man, I can't wait till training camp and most notably the preseason. I really hope that we're talking about Will Howard and Allar playing about equal amount of snaps once the preseason games get underway. I don't expect we'll see a lot of Rodgers and or Rudolph during those games as well too. But look, when the pads come on, that's when the real test happens. So good to hear that these young quarterbacks are getting more focused time to wind this offseason up. And then I think Mike McCarthy talked a little bit yesterday about what's in store there's another kind of school, if you will, that's going to happen, I guess, next week after officially the offseason program ends.
It's a rookie school is what McCarthy termed it, which I wasn't even sure. I'm not even sure exactly what that looks like. And I assume it obviously conforms to CBA rules, but probably a little more informal teaching for these rookies. And so the more work those guys can get with their coaches, the better off they'll be come training camp.
And I think Allar talked a little bit about working with, I guess, his personal quarterback coach, who I think is John Beck, former NFL quarterback, and is obviously been with the Cowboys. He has been with the Cowboys before, and obviously, Dak Prescott, and so he was getting some tutelage there. And he talked about how important it is for him to find out, kind of what the Steelers want him to work on his own with his quarterback coach once they get out of OTAs this week, and then in essentially their off time.
I always wonder how that works with how teams coordinate with personal quarterback coaches, because virtually every quarterback these days has one. And how do they balance making sure that quarterback coach isn't giving that quarterback different information than what the team is providing. So you don't get mixed messages. You don't break habits that are trying to be ingrained during practice. So I always wonder how teams walk that line.
Yeah. I don't know. I imagine we'll see some Instagram videos or something like that, potentially with Allar and, him going through potentially some drill work with Beck or whatever, once they get deeper into the summer. But I am interested about that process overall. And look, I mean, the proof once again will be in the pudding once we get into training camp and the preseason here.
Other players speaking briefly on Tuesday, Mason McCormick feeling comfortable on the left side, does not know if that's going to be a permanent switch, but the indication, the feeling is that is likely to be the case with him and Troy Fautanu flipping from right to left side and play their college positions, and Dalen Everett noting he's primarily worked as an outside corner, but ready to play in the slot if needed.
The McCormick interview, boy, I like those linemen that don't have a lot to say. It's just a short. You don't learn a lot from them, but if we did glean anything from it, it's the fact that it feels like, now he did say we'll see how it goes once training camp gets underway, but they're starting to get more of a even more of a defined sense that we're going to see Troy Fautanu and Mason McCormick on the left side of the offensive line once training camp gets underway. But I don't think we learned too terribly much of from Mason McCormick. He obviously isn't looking too far ahead when it comes to potential contract extension next offseason. He's just just looking forward to getting this season underway and showing another year of development, hopefully moving forward here.
Mike McCarthy commenting on Darnell Washington and his contract extension, which happened after all the players and coaches spoke last week, and McCarthy happy to see the deal done and called Washington a, quote, matchup problem, which he very much is given his size, and McCarthy noting he's not had many tight ends as big and as offensive lineman-like as Darnell Washington.
Yeah, he called him a complete wide tight end. He's very impressed with him to have a tight end that can line up next to the tackle and block a defensive end. That's not the norm in the last couple of decades in the National Football League. He went on to say Washington gives you the ability to play under center offense the way it was played in the 90s. So that's something I'm looking forward to. But he's done everything else. He said he's been there every single day in the offseason program, said he's a pro. He says he's got attention to detail in the meetings. Doesn't say a whole lot, but he's been impressed with his work ethic. Called him, as you stated, he's a problem. He's a matchup problem. He's a matchup problem in the pass game, especially in the red zone, third down situations. So he's added a lot of value to our offense. I guess the biggest question is how much, and it wouldn't take much to be more, but how much more will we see Darnell Washington potentially used in the red zone?
In the red zone specifically, only has 2 career touchdowns. Is that it for Darnell Washington? Is that the number on his total? He had the one jump ball against Denver 2 years ago, and then last year, what was his touchdown last year? Let me make sure I'm not misremembering.
Wasn't it the 6-7 one?
The celebration, but what game was it? That was the Bengals game. A short touchdown in that primetime loss. It'll be interesting to see how the team divides up the labor there. There'll certainly be some sort of balance and line to walk with 11 personnel. We expect an increase pretty substantially in that while still getting 12 personnel on the field. They're both tight ends, some sort of role and involvement in this offense. I would expect Washington to play about half the snaps, which is what he's done roughly throughout his first 3 seasons. So that all seems to make sense, but certainly want to give those guys their opportunities. And not many guys built like Big Darnell. The last one I could think of that might fit for McCarthy, I don't know every tight end that he's ever coached, but I think back to Bubba Franks, who was there for 2 years of McCarthy's tenure to begin his Green Bay time in 2006 and 2007. I don't know Bubba Franks was quite as big as Darnell Washington, but I listed 6'6", 265, and so maybe that's the closest comparison for McCarthy.
What was it? Mercedes Lewis, when was he there?
In Green Bay, I think that was after McCarthy. He was there. He arrived in, 2018 was his first year in Green Bay, played 16 games. So that's probably the next or additional good comparison there for Darnell Washington.
All right. Mike McCarthy was also asked, you play 11 personnel historically in your offense. How excited are you to use 12 personnel packages for Darnell and Pat Freiermuth? And McCarthy says, I look at offense really in three categories. You have two back offense, one back offense, and no back offense. Your personnel usually is dictated based on your roster. I've been fortunate to coordinate offenses for a long time, 20 plus years, and that'll be no different here. So that's how I've always installed it as a coordinator, and we definitely got some tight ends that I'm looking forward to working with. So he didn't really get much of an answer there, other than, two back, one back, no back.
How do you interpret that? How should we interpret the response of that's how he views personnel, basically by the number of running backs on the field, what the backfield action looks like?
Yeah, man, the fact that he mentioned two back offense does make you wonder, is he considering H back? I don't know how he's interpreting that. Are you going to, if now Nowakowski, obviously if he's going to be listed as a fullback or play a lot of fullback and be lined up in the, but we did see a few times in Dallas with the use of the fullback there. I really don't know how to interpret it because I don't know how he views kind of H backs and H backs on the move and along those lines. But, he obviously has two 4-down running backs that he considers in Rico Dowdle and Jaylen Warren. We're coming up on our annual discussion of how much pony we might see once the season gets underway. There, I don't think we're going to see a ton of it there. Look, I think at least when it comes to McCarthy, we're going to see obviously a lot of 11 personnel. I think you noted, what was it, around 25% of two tight end usage?
It ebbed and flowed depending on the year. I think in maybe 2021, 2022, you had heavier usage. Injuries played a role in that sometimes as well. I know that a little more 12 personnel when Kellen Moore was the OC and was the play caller, but McCarthy's still involved in the offense, still constructing the offense, and I think he's not so dogmatic about 11 personnel that he's going to run that entirely and ignore the talent Pittsburgh has at tight end. And so I think McCarthy made a comment last week that kind of look at the personnel and see what Darnell's doing and kind of makes you think a little differently about your scheme and your plan offensively. So this is a guy that's run, I'm sure, every scheme and every personnel grouping and has had every kind of roster that a coach can have. He's been doing this thing for 20 years as a coach and even longer when you include his coordinator days. So, there's still something to be said about getting all those guys involved. I think only once has McCarthy's team ever had two tight ends with 20 plus receptions. And I think that was one because of injury where somebody got hurt and missed a couple games. So you obviously want Washington and Freiermuth to each have well above 20 receptions this year. So there'll be something to watch there, but I think Pittsburgh certainly knows what kind of talent they have and want to utilize both of those guys.
Yeah. And look, I mean, when you're trying to run, you having an attached tight end to the line of scrimmage, you're going to hope that Darnell's going to be the one attached quite a bit, obviously, this year.
Right. And when you're facing especially those even fronts, those 4-3 defenses that you can have Washington block those base defensive ends, that's a real benefit where Pat Freiermuth or maybe a quote-unquote normal tight end wouldn't be able to do that. You'd have to combo and have a different approach in terms of how you block up that defensive end. Washington can handle that and often on his own, and so that's a big benefit.
Look, it's going to beat the hell out of, I think, Jonnu Smith last year playing. How many total snaps did Jonnu play last year?
Too many, most would say.
536 offensive snaps for Jonnu Smith last year, and to see those snaps go elsewhere to a different tight end will be refreshing, I think. And
now some of that will go to 11 personnel. You won't see the 13 personnel as much, but certainly some will get distributed out to Washington and Freiermuth.
Right.
And Nowakowski will see have a role too. I think what McCarthy talked about, two back, one back, no back, is kind of reflective of the West Coast roots and principle. The two back offense, I imagine any H back action, anyone in the backfield was part of that two back offense, 21 personnel. And so just kind of showing that McCarthy's still very much grounded in those West Coast principles.
All right. Eli Heidenreich got a shout out, or he was asked about. Mike McCarthy was asked about him yesterday.
Yeah, it was kind of a bit of a softball. Basic question was just how is Heidenreich looking? And McCarthy said doing a great job. So question and answer exchange as you would expect. So super interested. Just a similar question. I won't spoil my answer on this one, but what are the percentage odds Heidenreich makes the 53-man roster?
Yeah, I don't know. After Art Rooney the second called him the best 7th-round draft pick maybe in franchise history.
But he's not making the final roster decision.
No, he's not. It's going to be. I will say this: it's a tough path. I would put it. At least from where we sit right now, it feels like it's going to be. What's a realistic percentage based on the roster right now with Eli Heidenreich?
And assume injuries obviously can and will play a role, but assume everyone's healthy and that's not part of the equation right now.
Man, I want to put it under 40%. I'll tell you that.
Okay, you might get some hate mail for that because people are very much pro Heidenreich. I think it's close to a coin flip. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Look, I mean, how the question is how creative can they be with the rest of this to maybe carve out a spot for him? I think that, and a lot of times injuries and guys that he might need an injury type situation to help his chances within there, maybe at another position group. We've talked several times about recent here, at least when it comes to the 91-man roster, that there's going to be a lot of tough decisions, assuming most of these higher profile guys stay healthy this offseason. And what's going to happen to a guy like let's name off a few here real quick here that most people might have written in ink right now when it comes to the 53-man roster. Ben Skoranek, I mean, such a good special teams player, but doesn't really offer you a ton as a true wide receiver there. What's going to happen to him? Travis Homer, who was signed during the offseason, more of a special teamer who can, in a certain situation, give you something at running back, break glass in case of emergency. I mean, we already got a good sense that Noah Kelsey's going to make this roster. You're obviously going to have your top 2 backs in Warren and Dowdle, if healthy. Caleb Johnson's a question mark, obviously, now at this point.
What one player do you think Heidenreich is most competing with? And it's multiple, I understand, but if you had to pick one, his most direct competition, who would it be?
It might be a 7th defensive lineman, or
okay.
It might be, if we're looking on offensive specifically, maybe it is a guy like Skoranek.
What about Caleb Johnson? Which I know is fairly obvious because it's running back. But if Heidenreich can prove himself on special teams, which he has a background on, and Johnson struggles there, and obviously Heidenreich, great receiver, areas where Johnson may be making strides this offseason, but certainly not his game coming out of Iowa. Are we going to sit there and say, what does Caleb Johnson do better than Eli Heidenreich?
Well, I mean, Caleb Johnson hasn't given us any type of special teams, up
value,
yeah, going forward here, and it's hard to imagine that he will.
I mean, it could change. I mean, I think they'll give him a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't view this as a Hayward Bay type situation, with him as far as being that uncuttable.
Sure. Well, it not as a return guy for Johnson, I don't think, but on coverage, I think you'll see him get some reps there. Maybe as an up man on the kick return team, but for Johnson, where is his pass protection at? He talked about that with reporters last week. He's been working on that a lot. He's got good size, and so there's the potential to be a good pass protector, but something, again, he didn't do much of at Iowa because he was toting the rock quite a bit, run-heavy offense, struggled there last year. Can Heidenreich pass protect? Something he didn't do much of at Navy, given his involvement in the offense, the option nature, not a lot of passing in general, not a lot of pass protection needed. So that'll be maybe one area where Johnson can have the upper hand, but he's got plenty to prove there as well.
And then look, I know Eli's Heidenreich's being, to make sure to keep the running back designation within there. And I know he says going back to early football days, he's played true running back before. But I mean, what he did as a pass catcher and as a route runner at Navy, and then how he was used when carrying the football. There's not a lot of true lineup in the backfield, traditional running back type carries with him. There's to me a lot of value with him in the passing game, more so as a true running back here. That's why I don't think you can just sit here and circle one guy and say that's the guy that he's going to have to beat, because there's a lot of different ways I think this team can skin the cat with position groups to carve out a potential roster spot for Eli Heidenreich, period.
No, I agree, and that's why I said there's multiple guys, given the back end of the roster nature, his versatility, all the other pieces that might move and shake. But just to make the question a little more interesting, because I think the obvious boring answer is he's competing with a bunch of guys. Who is the most direct competition, and just to try to narrow it down and give a different perspective is the only reason why I brought it up.
Yeah, but as boring as that is, I think that's the God honest truth here. I mean, he's got to stay healthy. That's obvious. And then, I think, a lot of the numbers we've talked about, the potential of this team going with just 8 offensive linemen, and Mike McCarthy has shown a couple of times in Dallas that he's willing to go that route. So, can you keep your offensive linemen healthy enough by week 1 where and have the position flexibility and versatility where maybe you can carve out a spot that way? Will the team only keep 6 defensive linemen? What's going to happen in the linebacker room? Will we see a 4-and-4 split of outside and inside linebacker rooms, or a more traditional one where there's 9 total linebackers in the room? So there's a lot of different ways you can carve this thing up, and that's why, once again, and it's not just him either. Caleb Johnson, might they have to wind up, if they have something to work with there, to try to carve out a spot for him? What's going to happen to Roman Wilson? I mean, you go down the list here of some of these kind of fringe guys that, once again, I think it's going to be some interesting decisions for this team to make when it comes to the fit. What are your 7 inactive guys going to look like come week 1? That plays a little bit into the discussion. So there's what's going to happen with Gabe Rubio? What's going to happen with Jabity? Will those guys prove enough to be maybe a 7th defensive lineman? So I think it's hard to sit here. Rolling it back to what you asked about Heidenreich's chances, and until we see how things matriculate along here, once again, I'm rooting for him, but I think you got to put his chances at under 40%.
And 40% is not bad for a 7th round pick. A lot of 7th round picks are going to have lower odds than that. So I think 40% is certainly fair and reasonable. But yeah, a lot of questions. Who's your other returnman? Opposite Caden Weegan. Who's your backup punt returner? Also questions that'll help construct this roster. And you imagine Heidenreich might get a look in the return game. Probably kicks more likely than punts, but we'll see.
And then look, if a guy like Heidenreich makes a roster, you would think that probably not going to keep 4 tight ends. So that puts Tanyan out the door. Not that he's penciled in at this point. He's more outside the bubble than he is inside the bubble at this point. You've got a lot of different ways you can put this together, and it'll be interesting to see roster construction. Now, look, a lot of this is going to come out in the wash, whether we like it or not, whether it be injuries or performance.
Somebody just playing terrible.
Yeah, something along those lines there. But this is a good. Yeah, it feels I don't categorize these things over the years in my memory bank and all, but my recency bias tells me it's harder, at least at this point of the offseason, compared to maybe the last 2 off seasons. That's as far as back as probably what I can remember. This time of the offseason right now, it feels like roster construction is a little bit tougher when it comes to maybe a 53-man roster. A lot more different ways. It's a lot less cut and dry, it feels like.
I think it's partly because of a new coaching staff, a little unsure about their expectations and what they're going to look for, and no one's on quote-unquote scholarship except for the drafted selections. So I think that naturally makes things a little more uncertain than the Mike Tomlin, same coaching staff, where you pretty much know exactly what they look for, what they expect, and the relationships they already have with returning players, which, makes this year different. But I know last year they touted how strong the 91 was. Remember, the whole practice squad was just their own guys, I'm pretty sure, initially. And so that was them pointing to the strength of their roster. And obviously, look how things turned out. So I'm always careful of that. But the roster does feel better this year compared to last year. So I get where your head is at.
Once again, he's going to be a star at training camp. He's going to have a lot of activity around him. He's going to be a fan favorite. And should it get to a point where they end up having to waive him and him not make the 53, there's going to be a lot of upset people.
Since you mentioned it about the chance of keeping just 4 off-ball linebackers, who has a higher percentage chance to make the team, Cole Holcomb or Carson Bruner?
Man, Carson's such a good special teams player.
But there's something there they liked with Holcomb to keep him last year and bring him back this year.
Yeah, but with the age and I just think if Carson stays healthy and sticks out once again as a guy that you can rely on being a 14 core special teamer is not that's bottom end of the roster construction, especially if a guy like Holcomb's not starting. That's going to be, if it comes down to those two, special teams will decide it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I would give Bruner the edge if you made me answer the question. I'll have those odds throughout the next couple of weeks as I deconstruct the Steelers roster. All right, Dave, let's stick with our stats theme we've done on the last several episodes of the podcast. We talked about stats that must change for the offense, defense, and special teams. How about 3 numbers that should stay the same or would certainly be just dandy if it did stay the same? I wrote about that this morning for the site. The first one is offensive line penalties. Wrote about this in February initially. Just 13 penalties from this offensive line as a collective last year. That was easily the fewest in the NFL. The Rams second place at 17. And so Pittsburgh can replicate that because, holding calls are drive killers. They can certainly totally take the air out of a series. Now, some people will say that's because the ball got out quick last year. I studied that. I didn't see a correlation between other teams that were similarly built. Doesn't count for the run game where Pittsburgh was clean. Maybe there'll be some regression to the mean here. Can Pittsburgh truly be that clean? You get 1 or 2 ticky-tack calls that go against you. Obviously, that can change the numbers pretty quickly, but the lower the penalties, the fewer for this offensive line.
Yeah. Do you know who the leader was in offensive line penalties last year?
The team?
Yeah.
I don't off the top of my head. I imagine it wasn't a team. It was a team that was pretty bad. I will guess the Raiders.
No. I'm talking about on this. Who was the offensive lineman? Who had the most penalties on the offensive line with the Steelers last year?
I know I wrote about it. I don't remember exactly who it was. It wasn't one of the obvious names. I want to say it was like Andres Pete or something.
All right. Actually, there was a tie. It was a trick question.
This is why you don't host Jeopardy.
Yeah. Zach Frazier, Andres Pete, Troy Fautano each had 3 penalties or three calls against him last year. 2 for Fautano were offensive holding. 1 was a false start. Andres Pete, 2 false starts and an offensive holding. And Zach Frazier, 2 offensive holding and a false start. Boy, if you gave me a choice right now to repeat all those, I take all.
Yes,
I'd take all those in a heartbeat because your highest penalized offensive lineman last year had 3 in total. So when you're talking about offensive line in totality, one of the things that they most definitely did well last year was not acquire a lot of penalties there. So if they can repeat that, absolutely sign me up.
For 2 of your wire-to-wire starters, Frazier Fautanu to be penalized 3 times the entire year with a new quarterback with his own really effective cadence is super impressive. I think Say Malu had, I want to say 0 last year. I know he's now off to Arizona. Broderick Jones greatly reduced his penalties. I know that he missed time. That skews the numbers a little bit, but compared to that Denver game, 2024, week 2, 3-4 penalties on 1 drive. I mean, just not locked in. He was much more focused last year. So the group really played clean football.
Broderick Jones had 1 last year. Offensive holding week 7.
Yeah, really impressed. And that's why I thought his play was better, not just in the actual post-snap, but just how clean it was, how mentally he seemed a lot more locked in. 2024, he didn't know snap counts. He didn't know plays. I mean, remember that Raiders game? He had the wrong assignment. I think it was, he thought it was like a quarterback draw. Or I don't know, he's run blocking, and it's all a mess. And he just was not focused. And last year, he got his weight down. He got in great shape. He was dialed in. He was confident. He was finishing blocks. I mean, the play itself was still mixed as a pass protector, especially, but you really felt like a different dude last year, which makes the injury so much more unfortunate.
While I got it pulled up here, DK Metcalf and Joey Porter Jr. led the team in regular season penalty counts last year with 9 each.
DK got called for 9 last year. What was the breakdown on his penalties? A couple of OPIs.
DK had a false start, an illegal shift, an unnecessary roughness, 3 offensive pass interference calls, 4 offensive pass interference calls, 1 offensive holding, and an unsportsmanlike conduct. So he made sure to vary him up there.
A 2-game suspension for an altercation with a fan. All right, next on the list in terms of stats you want to stay, the offensive short yardage success, which was miserable in 2024, got a lot better in 2025. They were 63% on 3rd and 4th down, needing 1 or 3 yards. That was 11th across the NFL. In 2024, they were 30th in that category. In the run game, 2024, they converted 59%. In 2025, that number jumped to 72%. Certainly the tush push played a big role in that. I'm sure it's one big reason why they went to the tush push last year to solve some of those short yardage woes. Push or not, want to see that number replicated even better to get top 10 in 2026.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that we sussed out a little while ago when you were breaking down, what was it, 3rd downs, I think,
That was
right?
for the defense. That was for the defense short yardage. This is
Oh,
for the
that's
offense
right.
short yardage.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, if you continue going in the right direction there, what was it, 11th last year you have league-wide, 63%?
Yes.
Yeah, you definitely have it going in the right direction. Let's get that thing up around 70%.
And then finally, defensive takeaways. I've harped on this quite a bit. 27 last year, 4th in the NFL. I know there was certainly some big performances against the Colts and Patriots, but I'm okay with those big splash play games. Now you want more consistency. You want it throughout the season. They did go through some droughts last year, but bottom line is continue to rank highly in takeaways. Always a key to victory.
Boy, and how many almost last year? Queen had a couple. Who was
We talked about Chuck Clark dropping
Yeah, Chuck
many
Clark had like
interceptions.
3 in one big game or something like that. So
I mean, Herbig also, remember, he dropped,
yeah.
I think, 2 last year. There were a couple in the flat that he could have picked 6th one against Cleveland, maybe. I mean, there were some missed chances by Herbig, too.
Yeah, if I gave you that 27 number right now, would you take it or would you spin the wheel?
I'd take it, especially because Patrick Graham, even though I think it's a good hire, does not have the best track record of having takeaways and teams that have gaudy numbers. Maybe that's for a lack of talent, especially with the Raiders, but I'm a little skeptical. Certainly want to see him be able to repeat this number, so I would take 27 in a heartbeat.
All right, you only went 3 deep on here. I like it. It gives us gives a little bit to spark discussion there. If there was going to be a number 4 on this list, what would it have been?
Well, you mentioned the defensive short yardage success was awesome last year. Everything intermediate and long was terrible. So I didn't put it on here because we had just talked about it in the stats to improve the overall 3rd down defense. But defensively, 1 to 3 yards, I think they were number 1 in the NFL last year, which is fantastic. So you'd like to see that number, of course, get repeated as well.
All right. So, and once again, the whole theme of this is 3 stats Pittsburgh would want to repeat. So that's why, is there a 5th one? Come up with a 5th one.
Oh, man, making me dance here, Dave. I'd have to look at some of the numbers. I mean, the run success rate by the running backs, I don't know exactly where they stack up league-wide. That's kind of hard to put together, maybe an off-season study worth that. But I think Warren and Gainwell were both top 10 in run success rate among running backs last season. And so if you can repeat that and get some more splash plays, that's pretty solid.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I like it.
I mean, last year, Warren was 54.5% run success rate, Gainwell 55.3%. And none of those guys really, well, Gainwell had a little bit of tush push action, but none of them were the actual tush push quarterback like Connor Hayward, kind of getting some pretty easy conversions. And so those guys, I mean, that is you told me that's a good run success rate, right? 55% basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's becoming where you want to see that obviously a little bit closer to 60 in the league, but I think comparatively, yeah, we've seen it obviously a lot worse in Pittsburgh.
Only one running back hit 60% last year. That was Kyron Williams. The top two leaders were both with the Rams last year. Williams and then Blake Corum at 59.3, Emmanuel Wilson 58.4. I mean, yeah, Gainwell was 10th across the NFL, 9th among running backs, and Warren was 13th overall, 12th among running backs. If you can tell me they're going to do the same this year, I would sign up for that.
All right. Okay.
All right, Dave, where to from here?
Who's
Charlie
going to Wisconsin?
I got a couple guys going back home, and Riley Nowakowski and Jack Sawyer. They said they're going to train with Herbig and Watt. Obviously, Nowakowski went to Wisconsin, walked on there initially before transferring to Indiana for this past season, and Sawyer's going to hang around Watt and Herbig, which is never a bad idea.
No, that's not a bad idea at all. Go out there with the Watts and training with those guys. So that's obviously good to hear overall. All right, what you got? What's Charlie Batch thinking about here when it comes to stadium decisions?
Let me ask you really quickly before I lose the thought. How many sacks should we expect and hope and want Jack Sawyer to have in his second NFL season? Number 4, outside linebacker. We talked about the top 3 a lot. What about number 4, quality depth? Just 1 sack last year for Captain Jack. How many in 2026?
Yeah, I think if you're hoping for a bunch, then you're thinking that something has happened to the
Sure.
three guys ahead of him. Yeah.
Assume the top 3 are healthy, even though that's been a dangerous assumption based on their track record.
How about 2.5?
All right, I'll take 2.5. But interesting year for Jack Sawyer in his sophomore season. Yeah, Charlie Batch was on his podcast with Trey Essex, and they covered a variety of topics, but a little interesting. Don't talk about this too much, but it's become a little relevant with the Chicago Bears news of them likely to build their next stadium in Hammond, Indiana, and officially leave Chicago proper. And the Steelers have their stadium lease up, I think, in 2030. Acrisure Stadium is, open in 2001, 25 years old, getting close to 30, and Batch wondering what the future will be, and promising conversations are happening behind the scenes about the Steelers' next stadium decision. To be clear, Batch is not saying this team is going to move or anything like that, but conversations are happening. A decision will have to get made. Does Pittsburgh renew its lease? Could they potentially build a new stadium elsewhere? Comparatively, Acrisure, one of the older stadiums in the NFL, I think 14th oldest right now, as teams are building these basically coliseums in this day and age. And so it was interesting because when Trey Essex said there's no way this team's going to leave to go to like Erie or Latrobe, right? And Charlie Batch said, I'm going to stay silent on that one. So kind of leaving the door open. What are your thoughts on all that, Dave?
Oh, look, I don't know much about the city and the land and what's available and where would I live in Las Vegas where they just knock stuff down and put stuff. They don't. There's a lot of where they're ending up putting this baseball stadium. If you would ask me, 20 years ago, and told me that it would have happened, I would have said, what? But look, they don't have. There's not a lot of sentimentalness in Las Vegas. If something gets old, they just knock it down and put something else right on top of it. There, I don't know much about the city and the layout and all like that. I think the most interesting aspect here is what Three Rivers Stadium was 30 years, right? And believe it or not, we're coming up. I guess 2031 would be 30 years for Acrisure. Now look, Three Rivers Stadium was a whole different cookie cutter type stadium. It was before all the, well before all of, when Acrisure got built, it was starting to trend towards more of the new style stadiums. But at this point now, you look at the SoFis, you look at these stadiums that are being built nowadays, it's like Acrisure's kind of archaic when it comes to that. Could I see? I guess what you're asking me is come. I guess what 2031 or 2032. When is the lease up with this?
It's a 30-year lease, I believe. So I don't make me do the exact math, but let's just call it 2031.
I mean, and we're in what 2026 now. If you're asking me Do I think there's a possibility that this team could be, looking at a new stadium come, say, 2032? God, that feels so far away.
It's not that far away,
I know,
especially
but
in stadium time.
Yeah, I suppose it's possible. You tell me where it would be. You know more. Is it going to be out your way?
Yes, they'll put it in my backyard. So Dave, you get VIP seats. I don't know where it would be. Downtown feels pretty crowded. Some have wondered, would it be out closer towards the airport and the Crafton area if they put a new stadium? That's obviously getting pretty far away from direct downtown. So here's my thought. I mean, first of all, a decision has to get made within a couple of years, like 2 years, because you can't decide to build a new stadium 1 year before your lease is up. I think the Bills announced their stadium 4 years out. The Browns have theirs a couple years out. Chicago, I think their lease runs through like 2033, and so you got to have years and years in advance for any taxpayer money, which is a whole separate conversation. And then, of course, getting city approval, the construction, et cetera. These things have to get made, years and years ahead of time. So if we heard anything on Pittsburgh building a new stadium, it would be within the next probably year or two. I am very confident that Pittsburgh will stay at Acrisure for the next decade plus, that they're going to renew the lease. They've had many renovations to the stadium, including new grass, new playing surface this year. Art Rooney in 2024 talked about wanting to stay in Acrisure for a long time. Acrisure can outlast Three Rivers because it's not shared by the baseball team. It's a newer, more modern stadium built just for the Steelers and that experience, and so it can last and be a little more durable than what Three Rivers was. And then also the big thing is I would expect Pittsburgh to potentially build a new practice facility, and that I don't know where that's going to be, but their current location has received poor marks. It's not in a great spot. It's a pretty small piece of land next to train tracks, so expanding it would be very difficult and challenging to do. And if you're going to build a new practice facility, you're not going to add a new stadium and the billions it's going to cost on top of all of that. So I think my prediction is they're going to renew the lease on Acrisure, remain there, and then potentially build a new practice facility somewhere.
Doesn't Batch come off kind of like he thinks that he knows something here, though?
He was giving that implication a little bit, yes. What that implication exactly is unclear, but he seems to be a little bit, no guarantee they're going to stay in downtown Pittsburgh where they're currently at.
Well, here's the thing. We're in an area that's way out of my pay grade here because first and foremost, I don't live there and I don't know a lot about what land is available and what they what they own. What you're saying is you expect that this team to be at Acrisure through like 2040, right?
Yeah, I assume the lease is going to get renewed, probably a 10-year renewal. So it puts you about, let's just say 2040, and then maybe you evaluate from there what the future looks like. Eventually, we'll have to build a new stadium.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it'll be this time around.
All right, let's see. Who's getting a new stadium now? The Titans, right? The Bills, potentially the Bears.
I mean, they're getting a new one. It's just a question of where. It's likely
Right.
to be in Indiana, and then the Browns are getting their dome in a couple of years.
Okay. Take those four. Assume those are done at this point, and remove them from the list. What would be the oldest stadiums in the NFL? Do you have any of that pulled up right now?
I can't. I looked at it yesterday when I wrote it. I mean, Soldier Field is the oldest right now. I guess when
Right, but
Chicago leaves.
we're going to assume that gets moved
Right.
on here soon.
I think Lambeau will be the next oldest. They were built in 1957, I believe. I can pull up the article that ESPN wrote in just a couple months ago, or actually last month in May. Soldier Field, 1924. Lambeau, 1957. Arrowhead, 1972.
Wasn't
Bill
there talking
Stadium.
about them moving that going to Kansas or something?
I hadn't heard, but I mean, it's an old stadium. Arrowhead's pretty iconic, but not sure on that.
Let's see. The Bills got a new one, so I
Yeah.
guess the Superdome in New Orleans. It's
Is
probably
that is it? They have a new, don't the Saints have a new stadium? Is that a new stadium, Mercedes-Benz, or is
No,
that
they
still their old stadium still?
no, they just keep renaming
They
it.
keep renaming it. Okay, I
Yeah,
can't keep
yeah.
up with all the
Yeah.
changes there. Okay.
That's been since 1975. I think when it opened. Now they've obviously renamed it a few times. Hard Rock Stadium, 1987. Everbank Stadium. Aren't the Jaguars? Are they going to do something? I know they're refurbishing
Yeah, right. Because aren't they going to play in Orlando for like 2 years from now as
Mhm.
they build a new stadium? I think I'm not up to date on all their thing. I actually no, I think they're just renovating the stadium. They're not building a whole new stadium.
Okay, and even Paycor Stadium in Cincinnati is a year evidently older than Acrisure Stadium is. So I guess it's still down the list there. But it'll be interesting to see if I don't know if I'm going to be on the podcast with you in 2031.
You'll be here. Where else are you going to be, Dave?
But it'd be interesting to see, kind of revisit this. But at least short term, your viewpoint on it is you don't think this team will be playing in a stadium other than Acrisure uh, before 2031.
Yeah, I mean, my expectation will be an Acrisure for the next decade plus
Okay.
is the short answer to it all. So that won't be made official. And again, if it's 2029 and we've not heard about a new stadium funding and idea, then they're going to renew because you can't take 2 years and get a whole new stadium process from start to finish. So I'm sure it'll
How
be.
many games as of not many, I know overall, but have you been to any regular season game at Heinz Field / Acrisure? Sure.
I have not in a while. I went to some of those terrible Raiders losses. I think the day that either Gradkowski or I think it was Gradkowski, the day that Gradkowski and the Raiders upset the Steelers. So that was terrible. I've been to
Now
a couple
you've
of
been
preseason games. I was
yeah.
the training camp the year the 2021 with COVID where they had at Heinz Field. So I was there every day just for training camp.
What did you think about the stadium? And I think that's the most recent time that you've been in there, right? For training camp practices.
Yeah, I think and they would have the occasional family event at the stadium too. That one practice, even when they were at mostly Latrobe. I forget if that came after 2021 or not. Yeah, the stadium I think is fine. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time scanning it for the architecture, but it seems to be a functional stadium that's fairly nice, but obviously pales in comparison to these just crazy structures that are getting built now, which Pittsburgh does not need. They don't need to have this state of the art, top of the line with all the bells and whistles. It's not really the ethos of Pittsburgh. So I think it's a fine stadium for the culture in the city. But yeah, it's comparatively a pretty average stadium in the comparison game to the other ones that are getting built.
You don't think it'll be a dome the next stadium either, like Cleveland's wussing out doing, right?
No, and Art Rooney said he does not want to build a dome, which, I respect him for as much heat as Rooney takes. It's very easy to want to have a dome because you have a chance to get a Super Bowl. Because if you're an outdoor cold weather stadium, you basically have zero chance. Now Pittsburgh has other issues. Even if they had a dome, to get a Super Bowl, hotel availability is a big thing for the NFL. Pittsburgh's a relatively smaller city does not have as many hotel rooms available. But then you can host other events at the stadium throughout the year, concerts. The Morgan Wallen concert just getting rained out. That's just a whole other thing. If you have a dome, it solves those problems. You can host more things in the winter, etc., and get some more revenue that way. So it's very tempting. There are certainly very good financial reasons to want to build a dome, and I appreciate Rooney saying that's not Pittsburgh. We are never going to build a dome.
All right, it's reached that point of the off season right now where we're talking about maybe or maybe not a new stadium. So I think that's a good leave off point here.
Just one last thought though. I wonder. It's a fair question. Will Art Rooney be making this decision in 2031, or will he have stepped down and given the ownership role to, we assume, Daniel Martin Rooney, who's done a great job with the draft and the Dublin, Ireland trip last year and been given a lot of shout outs. So will Rooney be making that decision in 2031? He may, but certainly, let's say they renew the lease in 2040. I assume Rooney will not be in charge of the Steelers in 2041, and so someone else will be in charge of that decision on what they
I
think and feel could be different.
I think it's just more logical to think it will be it won't Art Rooney won't be involved in all that come time.
Right.
Even if we're talking about 2032, because what is Art 73, 74, 74?
He could be in it the next decision. I mean, and again, a decision will have to come before 2031 because if you want to build a new stadium, you have to decide on that within a year or two. He is how old is Art? I'm pulling up the wrong one. 73, according to
Right.
Wikipedia. So I think he'll be involved in the next decision. If they renew the lease, then what happens in the future, all bets are off. And by the way, Pittsburgh, the Steelers adding media availability tomorrow, Thursday. It seems pretty light but there will be some sort of media watch along during tomorrow's practice.
All right, so they'll be able to watch, but it doesn't sound like they're going to do any on-the-field interviews, right?
There's nothing listed about player or coach availability, so it does not appear so, but I don't want to say that for a fact.
All right, shall we get to some emails and close this thing out here on a Wednesday?
Yeah, we always find things to talk about. We got through the show today, so let's get some emails and close out today's show.
And I can't wait for my wife to get home. My pup is something to take care of. For those that don't know, my he suffers from seizures. He's epileptic. My dog, he's 7 years old, and we switched him to a new drug, and he's having a little bit of tough time getting used to it, and he's quite a handful right now. But my wife does a great job in handling a lot of that goes along with him, and she's back in Florida right now. Will not be back to Sunday. So if it sounds like we kind of hurrying through these things this week to get them done in an hour or so, we are. All right, let's get to some emails here. David Haig, I think this is the same one from Pittsburgh, Kansas, that wrote in a little while ago talking about all these extensions and such. I was curious who you think will not get an extension coming up. Who are some of the big names you think will be out the door in the next year or two? Oh boy, it's hard to look that far in advance. Alex and I already have had conversations about McCormick and Frazier, at least where we sit right now. That feels like those are slam dunks. A year from now, we talked about the Fautano situation with the fifth-year option decision next offseason, and assuming the fifth-year option does get exercised, to me, it becomes a matter of when. Past then, more than likely, it wouldn't happen until 2 off seasons from now, if indeed that's the case. Trying to look further out from there, I think a lot of to be determines as far as some of the play of some of these draft class guys go, at least immediately here, talking about this offseason. I think there's still a discussion to be had about Keanu Benton and whether or not that gets done. Obviously, Alex and I are both almost. I'm going to guarantee Joey Porter Jr. gets done. I imagine Alex will be in the same boat as far as that goes. It's just a matter of when that gets done with Joey Porter Jr. I mean, if you're talking about, the guys not named Spencer Anderson and, real lower level guys, I mean, it's hard to really come up with a list, I think, at this point, even next off season, of kind of viewing who may or may not. I mean, once again, I think short term, you're looking at it. I don't know if it's a slam dunk that Benton gets done. Obviously, you can make a lot of arguments that he could potentially be done here, but I don't know if it's a slam dunk. He was only really the question mark that I would say now. Now, as far as off after this season, geez, Alex, I mean, we talked about McCormick. We talked about Frazier. We think those are going to get done. Is there anybody else?
Well, I think for right now, we look at Patrick Queen and don't expect an extension to be done with him, a pending free agent after this year. I think Queen is basically resigned to the fact that they talked a little bit about contract, but nothing is likely to take place there. So that's kind of where I start for this year's slate of names in terms of some other names that we haven't talked about. I don't know what other veteran free agents there are pending right now. I've not got down through the list here, but that's just the first one that jumps to mind.
Who are guys they will be having conversations with once again next offseason? Well, what about Peyton? What about Peyton Wilson? I think that's a to be determined right now. I don't think you've seen enough at this point where you're saying, yeah, add him to the list of Mason McCormick and Zach Frazier of guys that are slam dunk going to get done.
I agree. You want to see how he does this year under the new coaching staff, but I think Wilson has plenty to prove himself, and so there's no guarantee. If he has a great year, you'll have those talks, especially if Queen does depart. You want that long-term option, but he's got to earn it first.
Obviously, Roman Wilson, part of that same draft class. If we're even getting to the point where we're talking about Roman Wilson getting into that picture based on what he did in 2026. That's going to be real good conversation, favorable to have at this point. So I'm looking at the list of players that we could potentially be talking about in, Dowdle, you would think he's going to play out his contract. You're not going to have those talks. Jalen Warren, that's not going to be a discussion. Sebastian Joseph Day, Holcomb, no.
To interrupt, the obvious one would be Alex Highsmith. He'll be in the last year of his deal in 2027. Obviously, what does the whole landscape look like? But he'll certainly be wanting a new contract if he's on roster next year.
Yeah, I would add him to the list as potential guys. And look, he's going to have a really good year, yada yada. But I think the list starts and ends right now with the four: Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, Peyton Wilson, and Alex Highsmith.
Yeah, I think that's a good look ahead.
And then this year, the remaining of this offseason, I think the big question is Keanu Benton. All right, Todd Gensler back in here. Is there any limit to how many OTAs an NFL team may have each year since it's voluntary? I see McCarthy is also having a rookie school next week. He has voiced several times just how limited time what players are in regular season practice due to CBA, but seems that he's found a way to circumvent it a little. I don't know if it's circumvented. I mean, we talked earlier about what likely that kind of rookie school is, and they can't get on the field or anything like that. He said, did Tomlin ever do this? McCarthy seems to be really involved and totally hands-on here. I just think it's kind of a new perspective here, and we're hearing, kind of different things and terminologies like rookie school. But I think there is a limit on total off-season practices that a team can have divided up between. And look, obviously it depends too. Do you have a new head coach? Do you get to start the week? Or there are stipulations that you can't have like 25 off-season practices because there is a limit in the CBA.
Right. Yeah, you can't. It's not just free reign like it used to be before that, 2011 CBA. Reading it now, the club may conduct a maximum of 3 days of OTAs during each of the first 2 weeks of Phase 3 of the offseason program. A maximum of 4 days of OTAs may be conducted during either the third or the fourth week of Phase 3, with the mandatory minicamp to be held during the other week. And so the rookie school, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I imagine it'll be pretty informal and obviously can't run afoul of any OTA. I don't think it's really truly an OTA, but you may just have those guys in the building with coaches doing some very light stuff on the field, a lot of stuff in the classroom. Not quite sure, but there certainly is all codified by the CBA.
Okay, that's got a couple of emails in the email machine taken care of, and we're well over an hour. So
just one last thing. I thought an interesting thing. I just kind of saw this in the CBA now. I know that some of the beat guys have mentioned it. Mike McCarthy mentioned it too. That McCarthy tells the coaches when to go on the field, which is interesting. Like they go on, like they're all on the sideline or all off the field, and they all go on the field together. And that is actually part of the CBA because the time limit. I just lost where it was at and all of this. The on-field time limit for Phase 3 begins when coaches begin to coach a player or players on the field, and so there's a clock to it. And so I guess McCarthy keeps and holds the coaches back for as long as possible. Let players kind of warm up as fully as possible, and then puts the coaches out there to really maximize the window, which is really interesting to hear about.
Interesting.
All right.
Okay.
I just wanted to note that.
All right, let's see. We will be back on Friday recapping the final 2 off-season practices of the Steelers, and if anybody speaks, we'll be recapping that. Obviously, we're on contract extension watch still, especially for a guy like Joey Porter Jr. We'll see if any progress is made there. We'll see what happens with Keanu Benton. We'll start winding things down here. We're getting close to, let's see, you got a series coming up, you said, with roster probability. I have my 90 and 30. That's not too far off series starting off. That'll probably end up being 94 and 30 because of roster manipulation. We'll see what happens there. But even though the off-season program is winding down, we'll still try to keep people entertained on the site and on the podcast. So until Friday, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button and follow the directions that way. So, until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.